"My dear fellow," said Sherlock Holmes, as we sat on either side of the fire in his lodgings at Baker Street, "life is infinitely stranger than anything which the mind of man could invent. We would not dare to conceive the things which are really mere commonplaces of existence. If we could fly out of that window hand in hand, hover over this great city, gently remove the roofs and peep in at the queer things which are going on, the strange coincidences, the plannings, the cross purposes, the wonderful chains of events, working through generations and leading to the most outrageous results. It would make all fiction, with its conventionalities and foreseen conclusions, most stale and unprofitable." "And yet I am not convinced of it," I answered. "The cases which come to light in the papers are, as a rule, bald enough and vulgar enough. We have in our police reports realism pushed to its extreme limits. And yet the result is, it must be confessed, neither fascinating nor artistic. A certain selection and discretion must be used in producing a realistic effect," remarked Holmes. "This is wanting in the police report, where more stress is laid, perhaps, upon the platitudes of the magistrate than upon the details, which, to an observer, contain the vital essence of the whole matter. Depend upon it, there is nothing so unnatural as the commonplace." That is from A Case of Identity. That would be the third adventure of Sherlock Holmes. The third adventure in Sherlock Holmes in the book The Adventures of Sherlock Holmes, which was originally published in the September 1891 issue of The Strand. And in this story, Miss Mary Sutherland comes to Sherlock Holmes because her fiancé, Mr. Hosmer Angel, has disappeared. On their wedding day, in fact, she is left at the altar as her fiancé vanishes. It's a mystery, and she needs Sherlock Holmes to solve this mystery because she's in love with this guy. She doesn't really know much about him. She met him at a dance, they fell in love, saw each other for a few times. Only thing that she knows about him is that he works in an office in Leadenhall Street, and that's it. So Sherlock Holmes, of course, takes the case. This story is not the best Sherlock Holmes story. This is one of the few Sherlock Holmes stories where you pretty much know what's going on right away. You can solve the mystery yourself rather quickly without any help from Sherlock Holmes. The villain of this story, and there is a villain in this story, you identify this villain pretty much right away. It can only be one person. So it doesn't take a master detective to solve this case. So that's kind of one of the downside. Sorry, my dog's making noise over there. So that's one of the downsides to this story. There are some things of interest in the story. One of the things that is interesting is that this story points out, which sometimes we forget, it points out just how few legal rights women had in the Victorian age. Yeah, it was tough to be a woman in the Victorian age, particularly if you have been wronged. The villain of this story correctly points out at the end of the story to Sherlock Holmes that, hey, I have not committed any real crime. And he's right, at least in the Victorian age. Nowadays, what this guy did, it would be a crime. But back then, it wasn't, I guess. That's kind of a bummer. But yeah, women were definitely second-class citizens in the Victorian age, that is for sure. And this story really points that out. There are a few places in the Sherlock Holmes stories where that is pointed out pretty dramatically. And certainly in this one. One of the positive things about this story is that you get to see Sherlock Holmes play Master Detective. He's at the top of his game here as usual. Of course, he figures out the mystery right away. We get to see Sherlock Holmes make brilliant observations and deductions. Watson is pretty slow on the uptake in this story. He doesn't figure out the mystery as quickly as we do. And like I said, it doesn't take much to figure out this mystery. So it's one of the lesser adventures of Sherlock Holmes. Really isn't a big challenge for our master detective. It is an entertaining read, and there are some good things about it. A couple interesting things that we get from Sherlock Holmes. We learn a couple things from Sherlock Holmes in this story. We are reminded that Sherlock Holmes sometimes will take the law into his own hands, and that sometimes he will make his own decisions about how he's going to deal with things. Like at the end of this story, he does not tell Mary Sutherland the answer that she's coming to get answered. He figures out the case, he figures out the mystery, but he won't tell her the truth about it because he doesn't think that she will accept it. Let's see if I could find the paragraph where he talks about that. This is it. If I tell her, she will not believe me. You may remember the old Persian saying, there is danger for him who taketh the tiger cub, and danger also for whoso snatches a delusion from a woman. So Sherlock Holmes does not want to snatch Mary Sutherland's delusion, apparently. And so he won't tell her the solution to the case, which is, of course, wrong. Whether she believes him or not, it seems to me that he was duty-bound to tell her the truth because that's what he was hired to do. But Sherlock Holmes sometimes makes his own decisions about these things, sometimes sexist decisions, but he makes his own decisions about this stuff. So that's kind of interesting. Sherlock Holmes, remember, is not a perfect character. He does have his character flaws, and I guess this could be one of them. So there is that. So A Case of Identity, not the best Sherlock Holmes story in the world, not the most challenging Sherlock Holmes story. It is worth reading. All of Sherlock Holmes stories are worth reading. So don't skip it because it's good enough to read, that's for sure. Now, next week's adventure will be the Boscombe Valley Mystery, and that one is certainly worth reading. That was an awful good one. So I will catch you next week for that on the next Sherlock Saturday here at Stately Vaughan Manor. Tomorrow is Sunday, so be sure to come and check out tomorrow's Sunday Penguin, and I will catch you then.